2020. Anonymous post. A 7-figure 2-doctor couple. What do we do with all this money? This is the 39.6 Facebook and YouTube Live Finance Show. The show that teaches high earners like yourselves how to make your money work for you so you don't have to work for your money. We talk general investing, taxes, real estate, syndications, Airbnb, and even the car you drive. If you're out there and you can see me and hear me, and if you see two sides of the picture, please let me know. I've had a lot of problems with my screen sharing, that you only see me and not the actual screen I'm sharing. I found this out after downloading some of these videos. All right. So I have this post. We're taking a break from taxes. We did a whole week of taxes. I got through Fishers on Fire's tax return, Schedule A through D, and how someone's paying 3% effective tax rate. I didn't get to Schedule E because Schedule E is a monster, and I'm going to need a little more time just to get back in the zone to discuss taxes. I did enough episodes for a while. Okay, but we're going to talk just a tiny bit about tax today. All right, excellent. We have a handful of people in there. I see you. If you're out there, just give me a hello. Tell me where you're coming from. It's always nice to see people here in the group. Wow, I should do more broadcasts at 10 o'clock at night and get more people in here. Okay, awesome. So I took a question from another Facebook group with mostly physicians. This is a long question. It didn't get a lot of responses. It's always interesting, the questions that get lots of responses and then those that don't. This one has two very high earning people apparently, and it seems that those questions kind of just start to other people just ignore them because they can't even relate, or from other reasons. I don't really know, but I think there's a lot of really good information here, and I wanted to start typing out an answer, and then I said, you know what, I'm just going to do a whole episode. I'm going to break this whole question down little by little. And wow, we got a whole bunch of people here. Thank you. Somebody's coming from the 3rd floor inside the house. This is like a horror phone call thing. The call is coming from inside the house. Somebody's upstairs in the 3rd floor bedroom that nobody uses. That's creepy. Okay, anonymous post regarding financial/retirement planning and asset management for a dual physician couple. Help would be appreciated. My wife and I are both medical specialists. I own my practice and she is W-2. This sounds a lot like my wife and I. I'm in private practice and she is an employee at a university. We have been out of residency for about 3 years now. My wife and I finished fellowship 5 years now, so we're like 2 years ahead. So this is not us. We are currently working with a firm that does financial advising. Okay, most people, especially high-income people, probably should have somebody help them with their finances. When you have this much money coming in, it's very important to have people help you. It is a whole separate job to manage 7 figures, okay? So they have a firm that does financial advising. I think White Coat Investor says approximately 80% of physicians should have a financial advisor. I don't deny that. It says, we pay for annual reviews, quote unquote, where the advisors/accountants are available all year for questions, parentheses, which we utilize. Okay, so that's good. They're available for help and questions. That's good. And then the actual annual review is where we typically fly to them. This sounds pretty impressive. They fly there. I don't know who fronts that bill and where they're flying to, if they're going to like Hawaii or something, but they meet them in person. Okay. They will meet in person for a day-long meeting and review our finances for the year. That's actually pretty impressive, spending an entire day with people to go over your finances. And this is not just for them personally, this is also for the business. They says, we see how our practices are doing when compared to others in the country. Advice is then given along with a lengthy to-do list for all of our annual tax savings, investing, etc. This service costs about $7,000 to $9,000 per year. Now, it's interesting. There are a lot of comments about how that's expensive, or maybe not. We're going to get to more of the question and the advisory fees underneath, but $7,000 to $9,000 per year for good advice is like crazy cheap. When you're making $1 million, it's less than 1% of your earnings, right? So that is not an issue at all. Now, I don't know who's flying them out there, but you're getting a whole day of advice. Now, if the advice is good, then this is like an incredible value. Right? If the advice is bad, there's no price that's that's cheap enough for bad advice. I mean, you can't have bad advice is bad advice. So if it's free, then it's still bad advice. And if you paid a lot of money for it, then you just paid a lot of money for bad advice. It doesn't make it better. But $7,000 to $9,000 a year for really good financial advice and helping you manage $1 million. Well, I don't actually know they make $1 million, but we're going to get to that. I'm just estimating they make $1 million. I'm pretty sure they make $1 million. So there's no problem here. And I actually like how they look at the practice and compare it to other practices. That's valuable because then you can see like where you fall, and if you're in like the bottom quintile or the top quintile, it gives you an idea of maybe how well a job maybe you're doing or could be doing. That's actually really valuable. And I don't think that we get a lot of that in medicine in terms of comparisons. A lot of physicians have no idea really what incomes there are out there for their own specialty. They haven't even looked at the published like AAMC data or the MGMA data to find out like what's the top 10 percentile of MGMA data, or what's the top 25th percentile for the AAMC data. Like those are things you should know if you're trying to figure out if you're getting well compensated or if you're doing well as a private practice doctor, etc. So I have no complaints about this idea of having questions available all year, a whole day long, once a year of like a financial retreat. That's actually a fantastic idea. I think most people should spend at least one day a year going over all their finances for the whole year for their business and their personal. Okay. So moving on. We have about 50 to 60K a month that we can invest after paying loans and living expenses. Okay. This is amazing, right? So this is where I get the $1 million from. So 50 to 60 a month after paying loans and living expenses. They have about $800,000 in student loans. This is later down in the post. $800,000. This is actually, besides that orthodontist that has the $1 million, this might be the highest I have ever heard of. Granted, this is across two people, so it's not entirely shocking, but still really high. I mean, when my wife and I finished, we owed around $560,000, I think. But 800 is a lot, and they've been out for 3 years, so it was higher 3 years ago when they finished. So I don't know how it got to be 800,000. I don't know if that's just going to like private medical school and maybe private undergrad, or maybe this is Caribbean school. I'm not sure, but 800,000 is a lot. So I just ran a quick amortization payment thing, and if their interest rate is 4%, and this is a 20-year loan at $800,000, that's $4,800 a month just for the student loan payments, and that's over 20 years. Okay, so let's just say $5,000 a month, roughly. So they have $50,000 to $60,000 a month that can be invested after paying loans and living expenses. Now, I don't know if they have kids, etc. They're making $1 million. Let's say they spend $10,000 a month on all of their living expenses. Okay, house, nanny. It's easy to get to 10,000. It could be more, but I'm just making up 10 grand. I think anybody making $1 million a month, a year, spending $10,000 a month is totally like that's 1%, right? That's nothing. So $10,000 a month and $5,000 in loans. So that's $15,000 a month to those two things. So that means they're making $65,000 to $75,000 per month in income. So, and that's conservative with a $10,000 a month spending. It could be less, but it could very well easily be more. So I'm going to, they're going to pay monster taxes. This is what one of the persons says. So I'm going to estimate they make about $100,000 a month. Where did I get that from? At $1.2 million. If you see the graph, please let me know. It should be here. But I've had problems with these pictures showing up. $1.2 million, which is $100,000 a month. That has an effective tax rate of 31%. Okay, so 31% effective tax, federal. I don't even know what state they live in, but make $100,000 a month, you're paying $31,000 to federal tax, so you're left with $69,000. You're also paying on average around 3.5% to Medicare plus Social Security. It's another $3,500. So you're paying about 34 to 35% in federal Social Security, Medicare, and income tax. So if you make $100,000 a month, you're left with about $65,000 a month. And that's assuming you're not paying any state tax. Okay, so we're going to assume they make about $100,000 a month, which is what gets you to $65,000 net. And if they spend $15,000 a month between living and loans, then you're at $50,000. That's just extra that you get to invest every single month. Amazing. Okay. So here we go. The advisors are advising us to do the following. 1, put 1/3 into our personal stock market account, which is currently about 75% total United States stock market at Vanguard, VTSAX. Put about 1/3 into their active, so their, I think the managers, their active investing, aggressive model investing, and then put about 1/3 into their actively invested Vanguard index funds. So 1/3 into their own stock market taxable account, or their own taxable account, maybe they have separate from the advisor, and then 1/3 in the advisor's active model, and then 1/3 in the advisor's Vanguard active model. But although it says Vanguard actively invested index funds, I don't think you can really have actively invested index fund. It's either active or an index. But so let's just say those are Vanguard actively managed funds. I don't know. So divide the extra cash into those 3 parts: personal account, and then 2 that are managed by the advisor. One of them is their own personal active investment, and then the other one is Vanguard. Maybe he means index funds. Regardless. Then he says, we have $800,000 in student loans. We are paying off student loans relatively aggressively at this point as well, and plan to be debt-free in about 7 years. Okay, if you're making $1 million a year and you have $800,000 in student loans, I wouldn't say that 7 years is an aggressive paydown period. I think an aggressive paydown period would be like if you had $50,000 a month going in times 16 months would be $900,000. So yeah, 16 months. That would be aggressive. And you said you could make $60,000 a month payment, so you could get there even faster. You could maybe get there in a year. Okay, so 7 years is like paying down $120,000 of the principal a year or so, and that's like $10,000 a year and $10,000 a month in principal. That's just I think you can get a lot faster than that. Now, so I wouldn't say that's aggressive. I would just say that it's not slow, because slow would be like 20 years. 7 years is probably okay. Now, again, if you were to pay this down in as slow as possible, your advisors don't really want you to pay it down, right? Because they don't get paid for that, because you're not paying them advice they're not going to get paid for that. So we're going to get into this more. Sorry. It says, after reading much from White Coat Investor, I am considering doing all of the investing myself and consistently putting money into the total stock market index fund. or others like a total international fund or a total bond fund, and getting into some real estate to help me with some diversification. The financial advisory company has me and a little of my wife's portfolio in their 401k, though she is mostly invested in her own employer's plan. Now that part confuses me. So I guess maybe his wife is also employed by the private practice that he owns, and she gets paid something and has a 401k over there. That probably makes the most sense. Then it says their all-in fees are 1.2%, which includes the investment fees as well as their own percentage. We also pay an attorney an annual maintenance fee to keep the 401k up to standards. I have read about America's Best 401k and the fees look very low. Does anyone have experience with this? Okay, so that's the whole question. It's a super long question. I'm going to break this back down. Their all-in fees are 1.2%. However, they also charge $7,000 to $9,000 per year. I have no problem with the $7,000 to $9,000 per year. You're making $1 million bucks, and if they're actually helping you with your business, that's fantastic. I don't know if they actually are though. 1.2% sounds like that's maybe about 1% of an AUM fee, an assets under management fee, which is honestly is pretty standard in the financial planning industry and cheaper than other places. And a lot of places, when you start out with a low balance, can be easily 1.5% or higher. But it's probably 1%. And then there are the fees of the investments. And it says, and that could be like 0.2%. So if you have like index funds, that could be around 0.1. But there's also these actively managed funds. But it says 1.2%. And I'm always, a lot of people think they know what the fees are, but then you actually dig into it and then there can very well be other fees. So I would caution you and make sure you really understand what all of the fees are before thinking you know what the fees are. Not that fees are wrong, because people all have to get paid, but you should know what you're paying. And a percentage of 1.2% is a lot when you have a lot of money. It's not a lot when you don't have a lot of money. If you have $500,000 in there, that's $6,000. But if you have $10 million, that's $120,000. That's $10,000 a month. So it really just depends how much you have, right? People get really, really up in arms about fee percentages because, yeah, compounding wise over a long period of time, it can make a gigantic difference. But when you're just getting started, it really doesn't make any difference at all. The question is whether or not you're getting good advice or not, right? 1% of nothing is still nothing. So we're going to get back to these student loans. $800,000 paying over 7 years, fine. It could be paid off easily a lot faster than that, it sounds like. But if you put money toward paying your loans down, you're not investing it with them, and they can't capture that AUM fee. You need to ask anybody managing your money. Ask them, are you a fiduciary? If they are not a fiduciary, then you should not trust them to make decisions because they're not making them in your best interest. Now, if they're really helping you in your best interest, then they're super valuable, right? But $800,000 in loans is a ton of money. Now, you should have a bunch of life insurance and disability insurance. Okay, you're married. I don't know if you have kids, but when you have that much of a liability, even though it potentially could be discharged in death or disability, I'm not sure, but you should check on that. I don't know if these are federal loans or private loans, and if they're private loans, if they would be discharged in those situations. Okay, have you refinanced them to a more competitive interest rate? I don't know. I mean, you don't get charged points like when you're refinancing a house. You don't get charged a whole bunch of fees to refinance your student loans. You can do it every month if you want to. You can do it all the time. You could get a bunch of sign-on bonuses over and over and over again. Okay, just go from one lender to the next. Okay, but that 1.2% is a gigantic percentage long-term, not so much in the short term. So a lot of people get in the comments I was reading were very upset about this 1.2%. What I care about is the advice. You own a practice. You are making, let's just say, $800,000, and your wife is making, let's say, $400,000. Okay, you're both specialists, so wife could be making easily 300 plus, and you're in private practice as a specialist, and you're making 1.2 million. So it's probably 400, 800, maybe 300, 900, maybe something like that. Where in the world is the cash balance pension? Okay, this is my problem with everything I'm reading. If they are really helping you optimize your assets, they should be maximizing every single pre-tax dollar you have. You are so far into the 37% bracket. You are basically all the other brackets. To get to 37%, you have to get to $600,000. You have another $600,000 at the 37% bracket. You need to get your income down and use up as much tax advantage space as you can. Okay, so I don't know exactly how old you are, but you're both specialists and you're both 3 years out. So you're probably, let's say, mid-30s. You might not be able to get a ton into a cash balance pension, but you should be able to get a good amount, something, and it depends how many employees you have, and that becomes a whole separate issue, but it's not even mentioned once here, which makes me concerned that makes me concerned they don't offer it, which I'm not necessarily surprised by because most places don't offer cash balance pensions. They're super complicated and most places just don't want to get into it because they're just so complicated and they don't have that much clientele that will really benefit from it to make it worth their efforts. I mean, even Vanguard does not have a cash balance pension package available to people. They will manage your assets and they will be an advisor to them, but they will not be the actuary and do the whole thing. Like they will not do all the bookkeeping, blah, 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 of a cash balance pension. Fidelity Institutional will. Vanguard won't. Schwab won't. Schwab will do it on small businesses, not institutional size. So you may want to go look at Schwab, for example, or other people. I don't know the makeup of your practice, how many non-highly compensated employees you have. I think like 10 episodes. Yeah. Episode number 66, 68, 69, 70, 71, 72, 73, 74, 75, 66, 76. Okay, 10 episodes on the cash balance pension. It is the most valuable tax deduction available to physicians that people don't talk about. People have talked about it a lot more this current year, but up until last year, it was like almost never talked about. I talked about it at WCICon this year, and maybe that's why a lot more people are talking about it. But hundreds of thousands of dollars of extra tax savings potentially per year for doctors blows away a solo 401k. Okay, so the first thing is, are you getting good advice? They should be advising you to open up a cash balance plan as long as the demographics of your group make sense. And your wife is an employee there too, it sounds like, or an owner. She could partake in the cash balance pension as well. The 401k, it sounds like she can't really get much into it because she's probably already filling up her 401k at the other job. And then she can get like an employer contribution here, but she has to actually do work for the practice to justify the compensation. But cash balance pension is ERISA protected. So part of your question was asset management. All right, so to manage your assets, you have to protect your assets. So ERISA 338 advisors, for example, you don't need necessarily an attorney for annual maintenance of your 401k. As far as I know, you can have one actuary and an ERISA 338 fiduciary who helps you with your 401k and your cash balance pension. This is going to cost you money, okay? America's Best 401k, yes, they have cheaper options as well as like guideline. I think with America's Best 401k, you may be able to do a cash balance pension. It doesn't sound like you have a huge place. I would recommend finding somebody who will do both your cash balance pension and a 401k. Now, the cash balance pension has to make sense first demographically. If you have like 100 employees and one owner, it doesn't make sense because you're going to have to pay them a high percentage, well, at least 5%. Now, if you're already paying them 5%, then it doesn't matter. If you have like a safe harbor 401k, you could very well be paying them 3 to 4%. But if you're not already giving them that much, then it is a substantial cost to you to give them 401k contributions. But I would first look to see if a cash balance pension made sense. I would talk to a number of different cash balance plan providers to do different illustrations for you. From my experience talking to different ones, they all come back to you with different illustrations, different models of how it will work, and different things they feel comfortable with in how they structure it and how they won't. Some will not do like a dynamic market-based rate crediting for the cash balance plan. They will only do fixed rate crediting. Okay, that's like silly. There's no reason to do that in 2020 when you can do a variable rate cash balance pension. Okay, we paid $100,000 for our actuary, Kravitz. No affiliation, but they are awesome. We have a gigantic group, but that actuary saved us 7 figures in our 401k in the actuarial analysis for employer contributions to the employee, in making sure we met the minimum we needed to give them and still keep our cash balance plan open and get it open for everybody. We just did this last year, saved us over $1 million. But yeah, we paid him $100,000 to do it. You might have to pay an actuary $10,000 a year to manage your cash balance pension in a 401k, maybe $20,000. I don't know how big your group is, but if you're getting like $30,000 each, let's say $50,000 each, I think is very, very safe estimate. That's another $100,000 maybe, or maybe $100,000 by yourself into a cash balance pension. If that costs you, I don't know, $10,000 and manages your whole 401k, that's like super cheap. Now, I don't know if there's other partners in your group. If there's other partners in your practice who may also want to participate in the cash balance pension, then the value goes up a lot, because you could have, let's say, 5 partners and they're each getting $100,000 in. You're getting $500,000 in pre-tax, saving $200,000 in tax. Yeah, that's going to be worth $30,000 easy to get that money in there, ERISA protected. Okay, so that's the first thing I would do. I wouldn't worry about the individual fees for individual different accounts. The most important thing is to have the accounts you need first. Then, sure, try to decrease the fees so they're not exorbitant. And there are different prices for the same product without necessarily being better just because somebody charges you more. Okay, so I've actually heard people have come back to me and said, because of your talk on cost of a cash balance pension, I talked to my guy and cut my price in half to be competitive, because Schwab only charges around $2,000 a year to run a plan, and the first year a little bit more, $3,000. So if you have like a single owner and a handful of employees, you should be able to get a plan pretty cheap. You should be able to get one probably under $10,000, maybe like $5,000 for one owner and a handful of employees per year to manage both the cash balance pension and the 401k. And it's not that hard if you have a very small group. Okay, if you have a big group, yeah, it's a whole different situation. But one of the groups I talked to, they quoted like $1,000 per person in the cash balance plan, plus another $100 for every employee that's not in the cash balance plan. Okay, so to give you an idea how much it costs. And that was just one group. All right, so backing through everything here, I don't really know how much you make, probably about 6 figures a year. I do wonder what your net worth is. Okay, so if you're making $1 million a year and you've been doing this for 3 years, you probably haven't made it the full 3 years, but let's say over the course of the 3 years, you've grossed $2 million. what is your net worth now? Because if you're not paying your loans, I hope it's getting invested. I hope you have a big taxable brokerage account. I hope you have solo 401k that's been filled up to the brim every year, 55,000, 56,000, 57,000 for this year. Okay. And I don't know the interest rate on the loans. That was another comment I put, but I mentioned that earlier. Okay. But your net worth, the first 5 years out of training, I think it's important to track this because it incentivizes you to put money in either paying off debt or investing it and not to spend it, because you can see that line going up. You started out probably around negative $800,000. I hope that you're back to zero by now after 3 years. You're paying a ton of tax, but I would hope that you're at least at zero, that your net worth is at least zero. And what is your savings rate? I hope your savings rate at this income level is at least 50%. At least 50% of net pay, 50% of gross pay would be great, but 50% of net pay, I think, is a very good place to be, because otherwise, at this income level, it might not last forever, right? And your lifestyle could be too expensive for your income to support it and save if your pay goes down. Like Medicare could go down 10% next year. And if that's a lot of your patients and you go down 10% and you keep the same lifestyle, your savings rate will go down. It might not be a problem if you're already saving half your money, but if you're only saving like 20% of your money and 10% of it goes down, then if you want to keep saving 20%, then you're going to have to decrease your lifestyle. But if you're making $1.2 million a year and you're saving $600,000, 50% of gross, that's awesome. Great for you. And on a net pay basis, that's really, really good. 80%, if you can invest 80% of your net pay, you should be able to be financially independent well under 10 years, no matter how you invest it. Now, asset allocation wise, 75% of your money in equities, fine. I'm not a big proponent of that, although I know everybody talks about it on all these forums. But you're making $1 million a year. You don't need to put all your money into equities. You could be like 20% equities, and 5 years from now, it'd probably make no difference because you're just throwing so much capital at your investments that's going to overwhelm the variability of the return of your investments. So I don't put more than 60% of our investments in equities, and that's excluding real estate. Real estate actually makes more than half of our investments, and then of the remainder, we have a lot of equities, but that's just like 30% of our portfolio, maybe actually closer to 20, between 20 to 30% overall. So not a huge percentage. So what happens is when the market changes, our net worth is relatively straight line. It just keeps going up because we just keep plowing more and more capital. Real estate, you say for diversification. Yeah. I like it because I like passive cash flow and it's super tax efficient. When you're putting all these money into taxable, you're paying the highest rates you can be paying on qualified dividends, 23.8%. Ordinary income on bonds, you're paying 40%, 40.8%. And this is not including state taxes. Real estate, super tax efficient if you invest in it directly, not in a REIT, but directly, direct ownership, or like in a syndication, direct ownership in a group. You can get that cash flow basically with no tax liability until the asset sells. So that's where we put most all of our taxable dollars, not just for diversification purposes, but because it's great cash flow, super tax efficient, and overall excellent returns at the cost of liquidity and leverage. Okay, but we don't buy leveraged assets that are super leveraged. Okay. I can't believe I talked for that long about this because it's just one question, but there was so much stuff in here. And take this graph back off. Sorry, I forgot that was on. Okay, I just got really excited talking about this. Shouldn't they, I'm going to go through these questions. Shouldn't they be paying off those loans aggressively? It's not up to me what somebody shouldn't do. What they should do that I can relatively objectively say is maximize every pre-tax deduction they have available to them, because that is the best risk-adjusted return you can get on your dollars at the top tax bracket is pre-tax investing. Even if it were to go in cash, if you can go pre-tax, ERISA protected, that is the best place you could possibly put a dollar, okay? I mean, even if you had like a credit card at 10%, I would still rather fill up all your pre-tax buckets because you're paying 37% in federal income tax. I know that people have these waterfall pictures of high interest debt, blah, 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 blah. Taxable account versus pay down the mortgage. Okay, no. If you're at 37%, you need to save tax first. That is an irrevocable cost. You pay that tax today, it will never, ever, ever, ever come back to you. Okay? Paying 10% income tax, 10% interest, yeah, that's horrible, but it's still not as bad as paying 37% federal income tax. That is a black hole. Okay. So should you pay them aggressively? I have a whole separate talk on paying down debt versus investing, but I think that every person should invest at least 20% of their pre-tax income for quote-unquote retirement. This is irrespective of how much they're paying to their loans or to a car or a house payoff, especially to a house payoff. Like, I hate to see somebody like say, I'm just going to pay down my house now for the next 2 years and have a paid off house and just put everything else on the back burner. Your house is an expense. It's not an investment. At least your loans you're paying down an investment in yourself. My biggest problem with paying down student loans super aggressively is that you have to make that $5,000 a month payment every single month until it's gone. All right. So if you had $800,000 today and you could wipe the whole thing out, that would be fantastic. You wouldn't have to pay the $5,000. I don't know what the interest rate is, so it's really hard to really know what the trade-off is. I don't like super leveraging when you're making this much money. I'll admit we haven't paid off all of our student loans either, but we have an investment plan and we haven't hit our goals yet of passive income and real estate investments. But after we meet those goals, then we very well may pay off all of our debt as fast as we can. But if I looked forward 2 years, 3 years, it makes no difference if I try to pay all my debt off first or if I slow it down. And that was our plan from the beginning, to not pay it all off as fast as possible, because I like to have more of that liquidity. I want to have more assets. If I die, my student loans disappear. I want to have something to show for all the work and earnings we have. If I just pay down all my debt to $1 of loans and then I die, I just wasted putting all of that in there. Now people say, well, it's a debt, you have to pay it back. My tax bill is way more than my student loans, okay, in terms of how much tax we've paid. We've paid 7 figures in federal income tax, which is way more than our student loans were, okay? And it's all going in the same bucket. It's going to the same place where they print paper, right? So personal finance is personal. Shouldn't they pay them off aggressively? I don't know if they should, but they should be pre-tax investing to the max. And I did not see that in this post. And that's actually the one thing that I think is the most frustrating, is they're paying all this money for advice, and the advice they're getting is not the best advice. So, all right. I just went off forever on this post. Okay, I like doing these questions though, because I don't have to like spend an hour creating my own graphs and everything, like I did with all these other things for taxes. Okay, that is it for episode 90. Is that 92 already? Wow, that was episode number 92. 8 more episodes until episode 100. I need to make a plan for that. That'll be next Tuesday. Any suggestions, let me know. Again, this is not legal, not financial, not accounting, not any professional advice at all whatsoever. This is just simply entertainment for me, maybe for you. And I hope you enjoyed it. Until tomorrow for episode 93. Have a good night.